A single mother works tirelessly at an upscale diner to provide for her young son and her ailing father. Suddenly, a ragged homeless man walks into the restaurant to ask for food. The moment her manager sees him, he immediately orders that the homeless man be thrown out. Unable to ignore his suffering, she secretly brings him her own lunch. The price of her kindness is losing the only job she has. But she has no idea that the homeless man she helped is actually a billionaire, and that this small act of compassion will change her life forever. Before we dive into the full story, tell me where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more stories of kindness every day. Emily Watkins pressed her forehead to the bus window, fighting the kind of exhaustion that made even breathing feel like work. Her shift at Maple Diner started in 20 minutes. At home, Noah was probably eating cereal again while her father pushed through the morning with aching knees, and the bills, electric, medication, groceries kept stacking up no matter how hard she tried to outrun them. She jumped off the bus at 5th Street and hurried to the diner, clocking in at 6:58. Cutting it close, Watkins, Brian Coleman, the restaurant manager, said without looking up. "I'm 2 minutes early. Early is on time is late." He waved her off. Table 6 needs busing. The morning rush slammed into her, orders barked, coffee refills demanded, customers impatient for everything. Emily moved fast, smile practiced, pain ignored. On her break she scribbled numbers onto the back of her receipt. Skip lunch, save $20. Delay Noah's new shoes, maybe another week, stretch the groceries somehow. But her father's medication, she couldn't compromise on that. "Break's over," Brian's voice snapped from the doorway. Emily folded the receipt, steadied herself, and caught her reflection in the metal shelf, a tired woman in a fading uniform holding her world together with grit alone. She inhaled, pocketed the receipt, and went back to work. She refilled coffee at table 9, cleared plates at table 3, smiled at the regular who always left exactly $2 no matter the bill. The lunch rush was building, tightening her shoulders the way it always did. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from her father. "Noah's shoes ripped. He can't wear them." Emily closed her eyes for just a moment, standing there in the middle of Maple Diner with a coffee pot in one hand and the weight of the world pressing down on both shoulders. Then she opened her eyes, put on her smile, and went to greet the customers at table 7. "Because that's what you did. You kept going. You stayed kind. You didn't let the world make you hard, even when it gave you every reason to become that way." It was the one thing Emily had left that felt truly hers, this stubborn, perhaps foolish determination to remain decent in a world that seemed to reward everything but decency. Around lunchtime, a strange old man walked into the restaurant. Emily was at the coffee station, and she saw him immediately. Everyone did. He moved slowly, uncertainly, like someone who wasn't sure they had the right to occupy space in the world. His denim jacket was torn at both elbows and the knit cap on his head had unraveled at the edges. His face was smudged with dirt, and his hands trembled as they clutched the strap of a weathered canvas bag. The conversations at the tables didn't stop exactly, but they changed, quieter, watchful. The old man stood just inside the doorway, his eyes scanning the room with something that looked like hope mixed with resignation. Emily knew that look. She'd seen it on her father's face when the pain got bad and he didn't want to ask for help. The look of someone who needed something but hated needing it. "Excuse me," the old man said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was wondering." "No." Brian Coleman appeared from behind the counter, moving fast. "Absolutely not." The old man took a small step back. We don't serve people like you." Brian positioned himself between the old man and the dining room, his body language aggressive. "This is a family establishment." Emily felt something tighten in her chest. She set down the coffee pot and moved closer, not sure what she was going to do but unable to stay still. "I can pay," the old man said, reaching into his pocket with shaking fingers. He pulled out a handful of coins. "I have some money, just something small. Anything." A woman at table 4 pulled her purse closer. A man at the counter turned away, suddenly very interested in his phone. Emily watched it all happen, the way people made themselves smaller, looked away, pretended not to see. Brian snatched a cleaning rag from his belt and threw it down at the old man's feet. The rag hit the floor with a wet slap. "You're filthy," Brian said, his voice loud enough now that everyone could hear. "You're making my customers uncomfortable. I want you out." The old man stared at the rag on the floor. His lips moved, but no sound came out. His eyes, Emily noticed, were clearer than they had any right to be, sharp and assessing despite the dirt and the trembling and the worn-out clothes. "Please," the old man tried again. "I haven't eaten since yesterday morning. Just, Marcus." Brian snapped his fingers at the security guard who stood by the entrance. Marcus was a big man, retired military, who usually spent his shifts reading paperback westerns and nodding at regulars. He looked uncomfortable now, but he moved forward anyway. "Sir," Marcus said, his voice apologetic, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "I'm not causing trouble," the old man said. "I'm just hungry." "You're trespassing." Brian's voice had gone cold and corporate, the voice of someone reciting policy. "Marcus, escort him out. Now." Emily's hands had curled into fists at her sides, her heart hammered against her ribs. Around the dining room, people were watching now, their breakfasts forgotten. Some looked uncomfortable, most looked relieved that someone was handling the situation. None of them said a word. Marcus took the old man gently by the elbow. "Come on, let's go." The old man didn't resist. He let himself be guided toward the door, his shoulders hunched, his head down. As they passed Emily, he looked up at her for just a moment. Their eyes met. She saw hunger there. Real bone-deep hunger. The kind that made your stomach cramp and your thoughts go fuzzy. The kind she'd felt herself on the worst days when she'd skipped too many meals so Noah and her father could eat. She also saw something else. Sadness, yes, but more than that, a kind of knowing. Like he'd expected this, like it happened all the time and he'd learned not to hope for anything different. The door swung shut behind them. Brian clapped his hands together, the sound sharp in the suddenly quiet diner. "Show's over, folks. Enjoy your meals." The conversation started up again, cautious at first, then growing louder. Silverware clinked against plates. Someone laughed. The world moved on because the world always moved on, grinding forward whether you were ready or not. Emily stood frozen by the coffee station, the pot still in her hand, watching through the window as Marcus walked the old man to the street corner and then came back alone. "Watkins," Brian's voice cut through her thoughts. "Table 6 needs their check. Move." She moved. She brought the check to table 6. She smiled and asked if everything had been okay with their meal. She cleared plates and refilled drinks and kept her face pleasant and neutral even though something inside her chest felt like it was cracking. During her break, she went out the back door to the alley behind the diner. She needed air. She needed to think. She needed to figure out why she was so angry when this happened all the time in every city in America and getting upset about it changed nothing at all. That's when she saw him. The old man was by the dumpster, bent over, reaching into the trash with both hands. He pulled out a paper bag, opened it, looked inside, then set it aside and reached in again. Emily's throat went tight. He wasn't just looking, he was searching. Desperate, moving cardboard aside, lifting plastic bags, checking every container for something, anything edible. He found half a sandwich, someone's leftover lunch, wrapped in wax paper. He stared at it for a long moment, and Emily saw his hands shake worse than before. Then he unwrapped it carefully, like it was something precious, and took a small bite. Emily's feet were moving before she made the decision to move them. "Hey," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. The old man spun around, the sandwich clutched to his chest. His eyes were wide, caught, embarrassed, ready to run. "It's okay," Emily said quickly, holding up both hands. "I'm not going to. I just wanted to ask, have you eaten? I mean really eaten, today?" He looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him deciding whether to lie, whether to preserve some last shred of dignity, or admit the truth. He shook his head. The sandwich fell from his fingers, he swayed on his feet, and Emily lunged forward, catching his arm before he could collapse. He was lighter than she expected, all bones and worn-out fabric. "When's the last time you ate anything?" she asked. "Day before yesterday," he whispered. "Maybe, I lose track. Day before yesterday, 72 hours. Emily had felt hunger plenty of times in her life, but never that long. Never long enough to make the world tilt sideways. She looked back at the diner. its rear door propped open with a milk crate. She thought about the rules. The strict unbendable rules about staff meals and POS systems and inventory control. She thought about Brian's face when he'd thrown that rag at the old man's feet. She thought about getting fired, about Noah's shoes, about the electric bill. Then she looked at the old man, at his hollow cheeks and his desperate eyes and his hands that wouldn't stop shaking, and she made a decision. "Wait here," she said. "Just wait right here, okay?" She didn't wait for him to answer. She went back inside, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. The back hallway of Maple Diner smelled like grease and industrial cleaner. Emily stood at the POS terminal in the server station, her fingers hovering over the screen. She had never deliberately broken the rules before. Not once in the 2 years she'd worked here. She showed up on time, followed every policy, smiled through every difficult customer. She needed this job far too much to risk it, but she kept seeing the old man's hands shaking in the alley, kept hearing him whisper, "Day before yesterday, maybe, I lose track." The server station was empty. Brian was out front, dealing with an irate customer, whose omelet had too many onions, the other servers caught in the lunch rush. It was now or never. Emily logged into the POS with her employee code. The familiar screen blinked to life, and the weight of what she was doing settled heavily on her shoulders. Here, right here, was where the rules lived. Maple Diner's policies were strict about employee meals, 1 meal per shift, logged through POS, eaten on premises during designated break time, never taken outside, never given away, never lost in inventory. Everything cross-checked by Brian every night to the decimal point. A server last month had been fired for taking home half a sandwich that would have been thrown out anyway. No warnings, no exceptions. Emily knew all of this better than anyone. Her hand trembled as she pulled up her staff meal allocation. 1 meal per shift, automatically deducted. She selected the hot plate special, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans and a roll, real food. The kind that could put strength back into someone who hadn't eaten in days, but she couldn't send it through as a staff meal. Brian checked. Brian always checked. Her finger hovered over the waste comp button. It was meant for food that got made wrong, dropped on the floor, sent back by customers. If she marked it as waste, it would still show in the system, but it wouldn't be tracked to her employee account. Just another piece of inventory that didn't make it to a paying customer. But it was fraud. Small fraud, maybe. Victimless fraud, she told herself. But fraud nonetheless. Emily closed her eyes, saw Noah's face, saw the pile of bills on her kitchen table, saw her father taking his pills in careful halves to make them last longer, saw the old man digging through trash. She pressed the button. The order printed in the kitchen. Emily grabbed the ticket and clipped it to the line, her pulse hammering in her ears. The cook, Tony, was a 20-year veteran who'd seen everything and cared about nothing except keeping his head down until retirement. "Rush order?" he asked without looking up. "Customers in a hurry." Emily lied. The words tasted wrong in her mouth. Tony nodded and got to work. Emily waited, shifting her weight from foot to foot, watching the dining room through the service window. Brian was still at the front counter. The clock above the line read 12:43. She had maybe 10 minutes before someone noticed her standing around. The meatloaf sizzled on the flat top. Tony plated it with quick, efficient movements, potatoes from the warmer, green beans from the steam table, a roll from the basket. He set the plate under the heat lamp and dinged the bell. "Order up." Emily grabbed the plate with both hands. It was hot enough to burn through the thin rim, but she didn't care. She headed for the back door, moving as naturally as she could, like she was just taking out trash or getting something from her car. "Watkins," she froze. Brian's voice, sharp and suspicious. "Where are you going with that?" Emily turned, her mind racing. The plate was heavy in her hands. Steam rose from the meatloaf. She could feel sweat beading at her temples. "Customer sent it back," she said, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. "Said the meat was overcooked. I was just going to toss it before Tony made a new one." Brian narrowed his eyes. "Looks fine to me." Well, the customer didn't think so. Emily shifted her grip on the plate. "You want me to take it back out there? Maybe you can explain to them how their opinion is wrong." It was a gamble, Brian hated confrontation with customers almost as much as he hated rule breaking. For a long moment, he stared at her, and Emily was certain he could see right through her, could see the lie written across her face in neon letters. Then he waved his hand dismissively. Just dump it, and tell Tony to be more careful. Emily nodded and turned back toward the door before he could change his mind. She pushed through into the alley, the door swinging shut behind her with a metallic clang. The old man was exactly where she'd left him, sitting against the brick wall near the dumpster. He'd pulled his knees up to his chest and wrapped his arms around them, making himself as small as possible. When he saw Emily, he started to struggle to his feet. "No, stay there," Emily said quickly. She knelt down beside him, holding out the plate. "Here." He stared at the food like it might disappear if he looked away. "I can't." "Yes you can," Emily said firmly. "Please, take it." "But your manager isn't out here." She pressed the plate into his hands. "Eat." He took the plate with trembling fingers. For a moment he just held it, staring down at the food with an expression Emily couldn't quite read. Then he picked up the fork and took a bite of meatloaf. The sound he made was almost painful to hear, relief and hunger, and something that might have been grief all mixed together. He ate slowly at first, then faster, like his body was remembering what food was supposed to do, how it was supposed to make you feel. Emily watched him eat, sitting back on her heels in the dirty alley. She should go back inside. Her break was almost over, but something kept her there, witnessing this small act of survival. "I used to sit at table 7, the old man said suddenly, pausing between bites. Before, Emily asked gently. "Before everything changed." He took another bite, chewed thoughtfully. "When you have everything, people smile at you, remember your name, save your favorite table. When you have nothing," he gestured vaguely at himself, at the alley, at the dumpster, "you become invisible, or worse, something to be removed." "You're not invisible," Emily said, "and you're definitely not something to be removed." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Emily saw intelligence in those eyes, sharp awareness. This wasn't a man who'd lost his mind to addiction or illness. This was someone who'd simply lost everything else. "Why?" he asked. "Why risk your job for someone like me?" Emily thought about Noah, about her father, about all the times she'd needed help and hadn't gotten it, about how easy it was to tell yourself that other people's problems weren't your responsibility, about how the world kept spinning whether you chose kindness or cruelty, so you might as well choose kindness. "Because today I can afford to skip a meal," she said finally. "And you can't. That's all the reason I need." The old man's eyes grew bright. He looked down at his plate, blinking rapidly. "Thank you," he whispered. "You have no idea what this means." "Finish eating," Emily said, standing up. "I have to get back before someone notices I'm gone." She turned toward the door, and that's when it happened. A piece of paper fluttered out of her apron pocket, carried by a gust of wind. It tumbled across the concrete and landed face up near the old man's feet. Emily's shopping list, the one she'd been working on during her break, trying to figure out how to stretch $70 across a week's worth of needs. The old man picked it up automatically, probably just meaning to hand it back, but his eyes caught on the words, and Emily saw him reading. "Milk for Noah, Dad's pain medication, knee brace replacement, electric bill, $175, shoes for N, urgent." At the bottom, in Emily's tight handwriting, "If not enough this week, they'll shut off power." "Wait," the old man said, but Emily was already pulling open the door. "I really have to go," she said. "Finish your food. Stay safe." She slipped back inside before he could say anything else, her heart pounding for entirely new reasons now. She'd shown weakness, vulnerability. "You didn't do that. You kept your struggles private, your problems hidden. You smiled and pretended everything was fine because admitting otherwise felt like failure." Emily threw the empty plate in the dish pit and returned to the floor, pasting her customer service smile back on like armor. She didn't see the old man carefully fold her shopping list and tuck it into his jacket pocket, handling it like it was made of gold instead of notebook paper and desperation. She didn't see him stand up, no longer trembling, his movements suddenly stronger and more purposeful than before. And she definitely didn't see the way he looked at the back door of Maple Diner, at the building that had thrown him out like garbage just an hour earlier, with an expression that mixed anger and sadness and steely determination, because Emily was already back at work, refilling coffee and taking orders and pretending that her hands weren't shaking, that her stomach wasn't empty, that she hadn't just risked everything for a stranger. She'd done the right thing. She knew she had. She just hoped it wouldn't cost her everything. The old man walked 4 blocks before he stopped trembling. Not from hunger anymore. The meal had helped with that, but from something else entirely, something that felt uncomfortably close to shame. He turned down a tree-lined street, where the houses got bigger and the cars got newer. When he reached number 217, a craftsman-style home with a wraparound porch and professionally maintained landscaping, he climbed the steps and let himself in with a key from his pocket. Inside, the house was quiet and elegant. Hardwood floors, expensive rugs, artwork on the walls that cost more than most people made in a year. The old man walked straight to the downstairs bathroom and stood in front of the mirror. Harrison Whitlock looked at his reflection, at the dirt carefully applied to his face, at the authentic-looking grime under his fingernails, at the costume that had cost $300 from a theatrical supplier who specialized in making people look homeless for film productions. He turned on the faucet and began washing his face. The dirt came off easily. It was meant to. Theatrical makeup designed to look real but remove cleanly. Under it, Harrison's skin was tanned and healthy, the skin of a 78-year-old man who could afford the best dermatologist's money could buy. His hands, once he scrubbed them clean, showed only the normal age spots and wrinkles of someone his age. No trembling now. That had been an act too, practiced until it looked natural. He removed the knit cap and ran his fingers through silver hair that was thinning but professionally cut. Took off the torn denim jacket to reveal a clean button-down shirt underneath. The canvas bag he'd carried contained nothing but props, a few dollar bills, some trash, a worn paperback to complete the image. Harrison Whitlock, former CEO of Whitlock Energy Corporation. Net worth somewhere north of $300 million, depending on which financial publication you asked. Owner of this house and 4 others. Collector of art, donor to museums, name on hospital wings and university buildings. And for the past 6 months, part-time homeless man. He dried his face with a towel that probably cost more than Emily's weekly grocery budget and walked to his study. Frank Delgado was already there, seated in a leather chair, tablet in hand. He looked up as Harrison entered. "Right on time," Frank said. "Got your message." The message? Back from test #18. Meet me in the study. Frank had been receiving variations of it for months. Well, Harrison sank into his desk chair with a sigh. "You were right, again. I usually am." Frank set down his tablet. "What happened this time?" "The manager threw a cleaning rag at my feet and had security escort me out." Harrison's voice was flat, factual. The customers looked away. "A woman pulled her purse closer like I might steal it from 6 feet away. And then a server followed me out back. Brought me a hot meal. Used her own staff allocation." Harrison pulled Emily's shopping list from his pocket and laid it on the desk. This fell out of her apron. Frank picked up the list, scanned it, and let out a low whistle. "She's drowning. She's drowning," Harrison agreed. "And she still gave me her meal. Risked her job to feed a stranger." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the window, a bird sang in the expensive landscaping. The house's climate control kept the temperature at exactly 72 degrees. The refrigerator in the kitchen, one of 3 in the house, was stocked with more food than Harrison could eat in a month. "How many places now?" Frank asked quietly. "Maple Diner makes 17, Harrison said. 17 restaurants I've visited as myself over the years. Places that smiled and scraped and gave me the best table. And all 17 turned me away when I showed up looking like I had nothing to give them. Except this server. Except Emily Watkins." Harrison picked up the shopping list again, studying her handwriting. Small, careful letters. The writing of someone who was used to making every inch count. Single mother, caring for an elderly parent. Working minimum wage at a place that treats her like she's replaceable. And she still found it in herself to be kind. Frank leaned back in his chair. "So what are you going to do?" It was the question Harrison had been asking himself for 6 months, ever since his granddaughter had sat in this very office and said, "Grandpa, when's the last time someone was nice to you just because you're you? Not because you're rich, not because you can do something for them. Just because." The question had haunted him, because the answer was that he couldn't remember, couldn't think of a single person in his life, except Frank and maybe 2 others, who would give him the time of day if he was broke. His children called when they wanted money for a business venture or a divorce settlement. His grandchildren remembered his birthday when they needed help with college tuition. The board members who'd once worked alongside him now smiled to his face and waited for him to die so they could vote in their own candidates. His country club friends, were they even friends, or just people who enjoyed the same expensive hobbies and tolerated each other's company? So he'd started testing, disguising himself, visiting places that had once welcomed him with open arms, and learning again and again that kindness had a price tag. Until today. "I'm going to help her," Harrison said finally. "The way she helped me." "How directly?" "Anonymously for now. She won't accept help if she knows where it's coming from." Harrison stood and walked to the window. "Can you handle the utilities payment? Make it look like it's coming from some community relief program." "Already drafted the letterhead," Frank said. He'd been with Harrison long enough to anticipate what was needed. "What else?" "The pharmacy. Her father needs medication. Set up an anonymous payment account." Harrison ticked items off on his fingers. "Groceries delivered to her address. Make it look like she won a contest or something. And find out what size shoes her son wears." Frank nodded. "We'll need her address." "I assumed as much. Can you find it?" Frank tapped his tablet, already searching. "Employees' home addresses are tied to payroll. Maple Diner runs on an outdated HR system, laughably unsecured. Give me an hour." "There's one more thing," Harrison said. "I want you to look into Maple Diner. The parent company, who owns it, how they treat their workers, everything." Frank raised an eyebrow. "Why do I get the feeling this is about more than just helping one server?" "Because that manager didn't just turn me away. He humiliated me. Made sure everyone in that restaurant saw me as less than human." Harrison's jaw tightened. "And I guarantee I'm not the first. If they treat their customers like that, how do you think they treat their employees?" "You want to buy it?" "I want to understand it first. Then maybe." Harrison smiled, and it wasn't a particularly nice smile. "After all, I'm just a homeless man. What threat could I possibly pose?" Frank shook his head but pulled out his tablet. "I'll start the research tonight." "Good." Harrison walked to his bedroom to change into clothes that actually fit his tax bracket. "And Frank, thank you." "For what?" "For not trying to talk me out of this." Frank was quiet for a moment. 20 years ago you told me that money is just a tool, that it doesn't mean anything unless you use it to make things better. I'm just glad to see you remember that." Harrison paused in the doorway. "I almost forgot. That's the scary part. You get comfortable, surrounded by people who only care about what you can give them. You start to think maybe that's just how the world works. That kindness is naive. That trust is for fools. And now I know there's at least one person in Austin, Texas who still believes in doing the right thing even when it costs her everything." Harrison looked back at the shopping list one more time. "I'm not going to let her go under for that. Not if I can help it." He walked upstairs to change, already planning his next move. Emily Watkins had helped a stranger without expecting anything in return. Now Harrison Whitlock was going to return the favor, multiplied by every zero in his bank account. And in the process maybe he'd remember what it felt like to be human again. To connect with someone real. Someone who saw a person in need and helped them, not because of what they could get back, but because it was the decent thing to do. That kind of goodness was rare. Harrison had spent 6 months and visited 17 places, proving exactly how rare. But Emily Watkins had it. And Harrison was going to make sure the world didn't crush her for it. 3 days after Emily gave away her staff meal, she came home to find her apartment's lights working. She stood in the doorway, finger on the light switch, flipping it up and down, on, off, on, off. The bulb flickered obediently, which made no sense at all because the disconnect notice had said they'd shut off power on Tuesday if she didn't pay by Monday, and it was now Thursday, and she definitely hadn't paid. "Dad." She dropped her purse on the couch. "Did you pay the electric bill?" Her father looked up from the kitchen table where he was helping Noah with homework. "What? No, I thought they were going to shut it off." They were supposed to. Emily walked to the kitchen and grabbed the stack of mail from the counter, flipped through envelopes until she found one with the Austin Energy logo. She tore it open. Dear valued customer, your account has been enrolled in the Community Relief Program, based on eligibility criteria. Emily read it twice, 3 times. What the hell is the Community Relief Program? Her father came over, adjusting his reading glasses. He took the letter and scanned it. Says here it's for families facing temporary hardship. Must be something new the city's doing. But I didn't apply for anything. Maybe they do it automatically, based on income. He handed the letter back. Either way, kiddo, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. We needed a break. Emily wanted to argue, to say that she didn't take charity, that they'd figure it out themselves. But her father's knees were wrapped in elastic bandages, and Noah's shoes had duct tape holding the sole to the upper, and she was so very tired of figuring things out. Yeah, she said quietly. We did. The next morning, Emily's neighbor Mrs. Chen knocked on her door at 7 a.m., holding a large box. This came for you, Mrs. Chen said. Delivery man said it was time-sensitive. Perishables. Emily took the box, confused. It was heavy. She set it on the kitchen counter and opened it. Inside was food. Good food. Fresh vegetables. Chicken breasts. Pasta. Rice. Canned goods. Milk. Juice. Bread. Enough groceries for a solid week, maybe more if she stretched it. There was a card on top. Congratulations. You've been randomly selected as a recipient of the Central Market Community Giveback Program. Did you enter some kind of contest? Her father asked, peering into the box. No. Emily pulled out a package of chicken, checking the expiration date. It was fresh. Today's date. I didn't enter anything. But Noah was already pulling out a box of his favorite cereal, the kind Emily usually said was too expensive, and her father had found the coffee, the good stuff, not the generic brand that tasted like burnt dirt. And Emily made herself stop asking questions. Maybe she had entered something and forgot. Maybe she'd filled out an online form months ago. Maybe the universe had decided to cut her a break for once. Mom, there's mac and cheese. Noah held up 3 boxes like they were treasure. The kind with the good cheese. I see that, baby. Emily ruffled his hair. We'll have it for dinner tonight. At work that afternoon, Brian called her into his office. I need to talk to you about Tuesday, he said. Not looking up from his computer, Emily's stomach dropped. Tuesday, the day she'd given away her staff meal. Had he figured it out? Had someone seen her? She'd been so careful, but maybe. You logged your meal as waste, Brian said. Customer sent back meatloaf overcooked. That's right. Emily said carefully. Tony doesn't remember making it wrong. It was busy. Maybe he forgot. Brian finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. The thing is, Watkins, we had a camera malfunction that day. Back hallway footage is corrupted. Can't see anything. Emily's mouth went dry. So I can't prove what you did or didn't do with that meal. He leaned back in his chair. But I'm watching you now. One more incident, one more thing that doesn't add up, and you're done. Understand? Yes, sir. Get back to work. Emily left his office on shaking legs. He knew, or suspected. Either way, she was on borrowed time. One mistake and she'd be gone. She made it through her shift without incident. Smiled at customers, kept her head down. When she clocked out at 8 p.m., she was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with standing all day. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. She spent them staring out the window, trying to calculate how much she had in savings if she got fired. $300, maybe. That would cover rent for half a month if she was lucky. She was so lost in worry that she almost missed her stop, jumped off the bus at the last second, and started the 2-block walk to her apartment. That's when she saw him. The old man from the diner, standing at the corner bus stop, same torn jacket, same knit cap. But he looked different somehow, steadier. He saw her at the same moment and raised a hand in greeting. Emily walked over, feeling strange about seeing him again. Like running into a doctor at the grocery store, someone you only knew in one specific context. Hey, she said. You doing okay? Better than I was. He smiled, and it changed his whole face, made him look younger somehow. Thanks to you, it was just a meal. It was more than. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. White, clean with her name written on it in careful handwriting. I wanted to give you this. Emily stared at the envelope. What is it? Just take it. Please. He pressed it into her hands. Someone did something kind for me. I'm trying to pass it on. I can't. Yes, you can. His eyes were sharp focused. You're going to want to argue, going to say you don't need help. But we both know that's not true. And there's no shame in accepting help when it's offered. Not from someone who knows exactly how much that meal cost you. Emily opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were 5 crisp $20 bills. No, she tried to push it back at him. I can't take this. You need this more than I do. I promise you I don't. His voice was gentle but firm. And before you ask, it's not stealing, it's not illegal, it's not going to get anyone in trouble, it's just one person helping another. The way you helped me. But did you get your electric bill paid? He asked. Emily froze. How did you, and some groceries delivered? Maybe something for your son's shoes. The shopping list, the one that had fallen from her pocket. That was you, someone who witnessed your kindness, he said. Which wasn't really an answer. Someone who wanted to make sure you didn't go under for doing the right thing. A bus pulled up to the stop. The old man stepped back, preparing to board. Wait. Emily said. I don't even know your name. He paused in the doorway of the bus. Does it matter? Yes, Emily said firmly. It matters. He smiled again, that same transformative expression. Harrison. My name is Harrison. The bus doors closed, and he was gone, leaving Emily standing on the corner with $100 in her hand, and more questions than answers. She walked home slowly, her mind spinning. The electric bill paid by a program she didn't apply to. Groceries she didn't win. Money from a homeless man who somehow had cash to give away. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. But Noah needed shoes. Her father needed medication. The rent was due in 2 weeks. Emily folded the bills carefully and put them in her pocket. At home she found another envelope in her mailbox. This one contained a receipt from CVS showing that a prescription account had been set up in her father's name, prepaid for 6 months. From someone who believes in passing kindness forward, the note said. Emily stood in her building's cramped entryway, holding the receipt, and for the first time in months she let herself cry. Not from despair or exhaustion or fear, but from relief, from the strange overwhelming feeling of being seen. Of having someone notice that she was drowning and throw her a lifeline without asking for anything in return. She didn't know who Harrison really was, didn't know how a homeless man could afford to pay her bills, or why he'd chosen to help her specifically. But she knew kindness when she saw it, knew what it felt like to be on the receiving end of grace she hadn't asked for, and definitely didn't deserve. It felt like maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as cruel as she'd started to believe. Upstairs, Noah was reading a library book, and her father was watching television with his feet propped up, his knees finally wrapped in new elastic bandages instead of the old ones held together with safety pins. Everything okay, honey? Her father asked. Emily wiped her eyes and smiled. A real smile this time. Not the customer service version. Yeah, Dad, she said. I think maybe it is. She didn't know it yet. But across town Harrison Whitlock was sitting in his study, reading Frank's preliminary report on Maple Diner's parent company. And what he was reading made his blood boil. Wage theft, documented but ignored. Harassment complaints filed and buried. Health code violations in 3 locations. And a systematic pattern of retaliating against employees who spoke up about any of it. Harrison set down the report and picked up his phone. Frank, he said, when his assistant answered. I want to know everything, every violation, every complaint, every skeleton in their corporate closet. And then I want to know exactly how much it would cost to buy them out. Harrison, Emily Watkins helped me because she's a good person. And that company is punishing her for it. That manager threw a rag at my feet and told me I wasn't worth serving. Harrison's voice